Welcome back to the No Ordinary Cloth podcast, where we stitch together a rich tapestry of textile innovations, one episode at a time. If you're curious about the art, science, and business of textile innovations, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Mili Tharakan, a textile innovator and researcher, and in this podcast, I give you a glimpse into the future and shed light on innovations bubbling up at the intersection of textiles, emerging technology, craft, and sustainability. Join me as I sit down with pioneering academics and entrepreneurs, radically reimagining the very way we make, use, and remake textiles. These stories will inspire and inform your practice and connect you to a community that will fuel your imagination and creativity. On this podcast, we talk about emerging textile technologies. These are often technologies and new materials in the very early stages of development. Innovations that are trying to find a product market fit. And I know many of you listeners are on this journey and you dream of the day where you can find that perfect match and find your early adopters that will get your business off the ground and you start to see some revenue. But as many of you know, this journey can feel very long and challenging as you spend years experimenting to find this product market fit, to find your early customers, and even to figure out what your product is. And sometimes you wonder if there will ever be light at the end of the tunnel. Well, on this episode, we have light. Yes, we're speaking with Madison Maxey, the visionary CEO and founder of Loomia, who has found that light after years of hard work, perseverance, and a lot of experimenting. Loomia is a soft and flexible e-textile company that is serving the automotive and robotics industry. If you know much about the e-textile or electronic textile industry, you would know that this has been a tough technology to bring to market. There has been very little funding in this area recently and very little traction from the market. But against all odds, Maddy has found a way to build a revenue-generating startup, and I am so excited to have her here with us to share her insights, strategies, and mindsets that got her here. From running a fashion blazer business to becoming a pioneer in the e-textile industry, in our conversation today, she highlights the importance of perseverance and customer obsession as being the key to building a successful business. She also offers career advice for aspiring e-textiles and thoughts on the future of e-textile industry and what we could be doing better. There is so much to learn from Maddy, so let's join her right now. Hey, Maddy, welcome to No Ordinary Cloth podcast. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. You've been on my list of guests for a really long time, really since the start of this this podcast. So it's great to have you finally on it. I'm not sure if you remember when we first met. I think it was at an e-textile conference, maybe an IPC event that was organized, maybe 2016-ish. It was just so wonderful to meet someone who was so full of energy and curiosity and passionate about developing e-textiles. Rather, someone who was really seeing the potential of soft electronics to create this bond or connection between humans and technology. That's always been your focus. And I've been a huge fan of your work since. I think the reason for that is because I've just really admired how you've persevered. You know, I know Loomia is 10 years old now, almost 11. You've really persevered, worked hard, and stayed very focused. And you were always about making beautifully designed, highly functional products that merge electronics and soft goods together. I mean, I stole that line from your website because that is exactly what you've achieved to do with Loomia. And I really consider Loomia as sort of like the gold standard for e-textile components. So I really want to get into that and all that you've built over the last 10 plus years. So let's start with where you are today at Loomia. You have created soft and flexible electronics, also known as e-textiles or electronic textiles. Could you tell us what products you offer at Loomia and also explain the technology development that you've done, what you call the Loomia Electronic Layer or the LEL tech that you have built?
Absolutely. And thank you for the kind words, Mili. I appreciate it. You know, in this field, I feel like we are kind of a community, and I also really appreciate all the energy that you bring, the products you've launched. So it's nice to, you know, keep in touch and hear such nice feedback from people I also respect in this space. So thank you. But yeah, our LEL is a soft and flexible circuit platform. So similar to how you could pattern a standard PCB to do lots of different things, you can pattern our technology for different functions. The main ones that we focus on are heating, cabling, antennas, HMI and pressure sensing. HMI is like switching and lighting, so human machine interface. Right now, heating is pretty big for us. It's simple, maybe it's boring, but it's where some of our biggest clients are. And then also pressure sensing is a big one for us as well, or force sensitive resistors. So we're really digging in on those. But we also plan to launch some new functionalities next year. So stay tuned, to see what comes up next.
Nice. So LEL started as a project during your artisan residence program at Autodesk. So can you tell us about what you were doing then and how you started creating e-textiles or soft electronics and how it's evolved over time and the iterations that it's gone through?
Of course. Yeah, you did your research. So I did an artist residency at Autodesk. This program doesn't exist anymore, but it was basically a 3-month period where Autodesk would sponsor you to work on some project that used their facilities or machinery, ideally their software. And so prior to coming to Autodesk, I had been hired for a few wearable technology-oriented projects and prototypes. And the prototypes were okay, but they really weren't robust and reliable. And I felt like we were all getting stuck. I would be hired by a big reputable company. We'd make a prototype and everyone would be like, what's next? There's no clear way to make this commercially viable or even just more reliable. And so during my residency, I really sort of double clicked on this question and started researching conductive inks to better understand how printed electronics worked. At that time, DuPont was really the leader in conductive inks, but I couldn't really get my hands easily on DuPont materials. So I was like, maybe I'll just make my own and figure this out. So I used one of the wet labs at Autodesk in order to mix up some formulas, and I built a plotter and was printing circuits directly onto fabric. From there, I knew some people who were starting a VC fund. I think this is one of those points where it was really just luck. And they were like, hey, if you want to make this into a company, we'll invest in you. And I was like, okay, sounds good. Great. Now I don't need to get a job. That's sort of how it became Loomia. And, actually then the company was called The Created. We had a few more investors come on and they were like, we hate this name, you have to change it. So we're like, okay, whatever you want. It's not that important to me what the name is, as long as we could make the products. That's really how it shifted from working on other people's projects to focusing on this problem of how do we make scalable, robust, reliable, flexible soft electronics.
And so you started creating these modular systems, almost sort of solutions that people can plug and play into existing production lines potentially. What made you go down, you sort of answered it, but what made you go down that path of building components rather than building a product direct for consumer, which is what a lot of the industry was heading towards?
Yeah, part of it was resources in the sense that it was a combination of resources and skills where, we had this discussion a lot because I think people really like the idea of a final product. It's very easy to accept. So if you tell someone, I am making this heated back wrap that you can buy, look at the pictures, they'll be like, oh, great, cool. Or maybe they won't like it, who knows, but there's kind of a definitive answer. If you tell someone I'm making flexible electronic components, they're generally like, I don't get it. The question is always, what would you use it for? And my response is often like, well, you wouldn't use it. It's like not a consumer product. They're parts of things for engineers and designers. But anyways, we definitely felt some pressure to go towards something that just was kind of easier to explain, final commercial product, super focused. But looking at our team, we didn't feel like we wanted to go into a really marketing heavy direction. I know some marketing because I need to for a business, but I definitely wouldn't say that marketing is my calling in life. I love the product development. Our CTO, Ezgi, also really loves the product development. And I think with that, creating a final end product really is mostly marketing. Like once you've made the product, it's about marketing it until everyone has one. And then you make new products and then you market those until everyone has one. And we were like, we just aren't going to be that good at this. And it's also really expensive. So instead we were like, let's make components. We like that more. It's interesting. We want to work with engineers. We want to work with designers. And so this product was a better fit for us personally. it was a better fit for our budgets. And we felt like in the long term, it would be more feasible. We wouldn't get stuck in a place where we needed a huge marketing budget to make the product a success.
So you actually studied fashion design at Parsons. That's where your sort of career started. And if I understand correctly, you were pursuing a career in fashion industry. And in fact, I found an interview of yours when you were, I think, about 19 years old, and and where you had mentioned that this is something you've enjoyed doing since you were about 15 or 16 years old. Fashion was everything you wanted to do. And in that interview, they asked you what your 10-year vision for your company was as a fashion brand. And your big dream was to get your blazer line into anthropology. I don't know if you remember that, but
it's so funny. Yeah. Yeah, at that point, so when I was in college, this sort of was my first turning point. I did really want to go into fashion. I think the things that I loved most were the materials and the construction techniques. So I think a lot of the work that we do now leans much more into that. I used to like to go to the mall and play the fiber identification game where you feel a fabric and you're like, oh, it feels like 20% viscose, 80% polyester, whatever it is. I still have this book I bought as a teenager, which is like a book full of fabric swatches and their fiber content. And you can like flip through and be like, oh, cool. That's the response, right? Oh, wow. Unfortunately, in the fashion industry, that's not really what you spend your time on, as I learned. And I wanted to go into something that was a little bit more about the technical details of soft goods construction. And so I think that's sort of how I ended up on this path. And I think a lot of the work that we do still takes a lot of, because, the fashion industry is so much about making things work, to take the line from Tim Gunn. But, it's like, you really have to do a lot of creative problem solving with materials that you have and with the skills that you have. And I think we take some of that mentality into our work, but then we try and really back it up with data and science and measurements and rigor. And so that's all really come together. But yes, at that point, when I was in college, in my dorm room, I asked my college roommate to start a blazer company with me. And that's what helped me get the Teal Fellowship, which was this grant to leave school for 2 years, because I already had a business when I applied. But when I started the Teal Fellowship, I saw all these cool tech things that other people were doing. And I was like, okay, maybe blazers is not the answer. Maybe I want to go into something a little bit different. Sometimes I think about it and I'm like, if I kept those blazers going, I think it could have been a really good business. But
yeah.
hindsight, they didn't have to be great, but I think a blazer business has less complications than an e-textile business. I'm guessing. So,
oh yeah, definitely. So that's a big transition from blazers to e-textiles. What caught your attention about wearable technology or smart textiles, and how did you make that transition? It's a whole new set of skills, learning about electronics and technology. What did those early days feel like, and where did you think it was going to take you?
Yeah, so I think for me, it never felt like a really fine line transition or a big change. I think part of this came from my father. He was an aerospace engineer, and he was the one who taught me to sew because he liked to make his own pants, and he liked to make curtains and slip covers for our house. And he was always soldering things in the living room. So to me, it was not weird. I was like, some days you sew, some days you solder. Like, that's how we live our lives. Exactly. He decided he wanted to regrout to the bathroom, and he read a book, and he was like, I am now a grouter. That was sort of his mentality. Yeah. So yeah, for me, it was very much so like following curiosity. I was like, oh, this is how a basic circuit works. That's really cool. I wonder if I could make one. I wonder if I can use an Arduino. Oh, wow. If you can use an Arduino and you know some things about textiles, you can work on wearable technology stuff. That's very interesting. What else is down there? It was very much so, like chasing these little crumbs and seeing what I could find. And then I think that the biggest sort of hard and fast line is that I went back to school to finish my degree in material science and engineering. So that was sort of like backfilling the background that I needed. But the interest itself felt like a kind of natural progression.
And so tell us a bit more about this. You went back to school quite recently, isn't it? A few years ago, just to finish your BSc in Material Science at Stanford. What was that like being back in school with all this experience of, starting a company? How did that feel?
Yeah, definitely. So, that there is pros and cons to anything. I think I definitely would have made more friends or been more social if I was going at a normal time in a normal way. But I did feel like I had laser focus and I felt like I had the time management skills to handle the work in a way that you don't if you don't have a lot of things pulling at you or if you're kind of fresh out of high school. The classes I saw, I feel like I looked at them with Loomia lenses on. I was like, will this help my work? Will this help my work? Like I took a life cycle analysis class that taught you how to do a product life cycle analysis because I was like, this will be relevant. And then the next year, I took all of the information from that class and I worked with one of my teammates, Gigi, to do an LCA for our Loomia Electronic Layer. It's not a full LCA, but I had all the tools to be like, this is how you choose a functional unit. This is the database that we can use for all the material properties. So yeah, every class I took, I felt like pushed me a little bit further in terms of Loomia's development. That was my goal. And with that, I do think it was very helpful. Like I had a fire to learn and absorb the information. I definitely wasn't like, oh, lame, gotta be in class today. It was like, no, tell me, I must know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's different when you're sort of older and you have a lot of experience behind you and then you go back to school. You just value that time so much more and you have questions that you want to ask and learn about rather than being so young and you're just sort of sitting there being much more passive in that learning experience. So I know it's tricky for people to find that time, but I don't know how you do it. You're running a startup and going back to school. Amazing.
The team was very important. Like critically so. If not for a team, it would not have been possible.
You set up Loomia in 2014. Did you have a team? Is this a team that you sort of built up along the way? How many of you are there in your team?
Yeah, it's been along the way. We're a small team, so there's 6 of us full time. And kind of in terms of the company, so it's been 10 years, but when I look at the breakdown over time, there are definitely clear phases. So from 2014 to 2016, I incorporated this company. I did not know what it did yet. I wasn't sure where it was going. And that was very much so an exploratory period where I ended up doing a lot of wearable tech consulting projects. So it was kind of like whatever fell into the basket, I was very happy to do and get some connections and learn a little bit. 2016, 2017-ish was when you got our first investor money in. And that's when I started hiring people and we were like, okay, we're solving this particular problem. 2016, 17 until 2019 was really product development. So we didn't have something, we tried, but we didn't have something that was really compelling for anyone to buy for a very long period of time. 2019 was when we first started getting customers for joint developments or product development scopes. One of these customers was a big aerospace company. And in 2020, that all fell apart because air travel was no longer very possible. So yeah, 2020 and 2021, I would say were kind of non-standard pandemic times. And then, 2022 till now, I feel like we're kind of back on the track that we set out to be on. So there are lots of these like little chunks within the company timeline. I would say sort of in 2016, I started working with Ezgi, who's our CTO, and we've been working together ever since. So that's been a really great partnership for the company. And then we've kind of brought people on along the way.
What were some of the challenges that you faced in the early days of setting up Loomia, in the first 5 years, for example?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just a challenging thing to create something from scratch. I mean, I guess that sounds very simple, but I think that a big part of it is that these kinds of materials companies often come out of a lab or they come from a group of PhDs. They tend to come from very certain environments because they require particular things and particular know-how, which we didn't really have. So I think there was this learning curve of figuring out, I would see friends or people I knew through different programs who were setting up software businesses or consumer product businesses, different kinds of businesses. And I think that one of the challenges is that you can't look at that. You have to look at people who are doing materials businesses, but most of those people are not at really poppy startup events because it's a slower growth kind of business. And so I think part of it was just figuring out what models to follow. Of course, money is always hard because you need money for things and you may not have that money, so you have to figure things out. And then I think the last part was learning to sell to customers was difficult. We sell a lot to large companies. We sell to somewhat seasoned engineers. We needed to get together a process to understand how to earn their trust, how to position our product properly, and how to get those deals. I mean, I think that if you can sell well, if you can market well, then you always earn the right to make and work on cool things because you can get those things to market. So that was definitely a challenge, but it's also very important.
Well, from following your work over the years, at least from the outside, it seemed like there was a clear strategy. It was all very methodically worked out. And you had these e-textile solutions that you offered, but I have a feeling it wasn't so straightforward. So tell us how you started figuring out where you're going or where there was a need or where you could find a market for what you were developing.
Yeah, thank you. That's so nice of you. Sometimes I look at things we have on the internet and I'm like, oh my God, I hope no one else sees this. But I'm glad those things are hidden deep enough for you to find them so easily. But yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest North Star, especially for me and Ezgi since 2019, has been the customers. So we basically all do whatever people who fit into our qualified customer profile want us to do. I'm like, if they're asking for X, we should do X. If they need Y, we should try and do Y. So sometimes we can't. And if we can't, that's one thing. But I think having that really clear voice that we follow has helped a lot. And whenever we didn't have that clear customer voice, we were like, is our customer students, their customer makers? I think we were asking a lot of those questions around like 2018, maybe even some of 2019. That's where it becomes hard to make decisions. Right now, I think our customer feels really clear. So it's much easier to have a clear strategy because we're like, if so-and-so needs it, if so-and-so wants it, then we should probably do it. We should make a plan to do it.
A lot of times within e-textiles, it's been much more of a tech-forward approach. So you created this technology and they're sort of walking around trying to figure out where it would make sense and where the market is. So when you had all these prototypes and some stage of product that you had developed, how were you trying to engage customers to find out where or who that right fit might be?
At that point, I don't think we were doing a lot of outbound. We had some decent press, and I think that the press was helping us to attract really early adopters. And it's like once someone fell in our net, we would do everything we could to try and capture them, try and serve them, give their needs, and then listen to what they're asking and try and make that possible. I mean, we did develop the product without knowing which applications it should be used for. I definitely think we started with that technique. I mean, kind of lack of technique of like technology first, let's make it think maybe people will buy it. But I think over time we started listening and refining. I wish I could see that I came up with some of these use cases that we think do well, but it's really been customers. It's like sometimes we hear patterns, like 4 people ask for the same thing in the same, in a period of 6 months, and they're all competitors. And so you're like, okay, that's a hot topic. Like we gotta prove that we can do this to one of these people so that we're in this market. And yeah, right now it's very much so about listening to the voices that we have coming in. Back then, I think the press helped us actually get people talking to us. That was also, I think, somewhat of a lucky thing that we were able to at least get a few drips and drops of people interested enough to get some momentum.
In 2016 to about 2019, while you're doing the product development and research, could you talk us through what that phase looked like, what your process is for research and development?
Yeah, so we were also getting the process together, but I think one of the biggest things that we started defining for how we do our R&D is a difference between something we call genesis and refinement, and then eventually commercialization. But genesis and refinement is the R&D period. Kind of this philosophy is sort of built for 2 different personality types, which I think is somewhat mine and Ezgi's personality types, where some people are very good with very little direction and a big goal. And they'll just kind of like whip something together, and it won't be very good. Like no one will want to buy it at that stage, but it will be a very early proof of concept. And that's sort of the genesis. But again, you can prove it's possible. Nobody will buy it until it's been refined. And it's a different kind of person who takes that genesis and makes it, tests it, evaluates it, makes the design look great, makes the performance improved. So that's the refinement period. And so all of our R&D, even for the original Loomia layer, we tried to slot it into that process, which is basically a pass off from me to Ezgi. So it's like, okay, let's see if this makes sense. Can we do it? Quick and dirty, scrappy. This is the direction. Okay, now let's refine it. Let's get to a place where somebody will want it. Somebody might buy it. And then the next step from there is commercialization. I think that's really what we're looking at today is, okay, let's get them to buy lots of them. Let's move it to the next level. Yeah, that was like the backbone of our R&D process, this genesis and refinement idea.
And now you're really in that place of marketing and getting this into sort of, actual customers who are paying for your orders. You're really starting to scale that up. And one of the main markets that you've identified is the auto industry, the automotive industry. And you've been working with the likes of Ford and Hyundai and others. So tell us a bit about the auto industry. I know very little about it. What is capturing their interest in soft and flexible technology? What problem are you solving for them?
Yeah, so we kind of pinned down that our technology, or e-textiles in general, tend to serve or solve an electro-mechanical problem. So it's a combination of electronic issues and mechanical issues where you need electronics to perform a certain way, but also have a certain set of mechanical properties like drapability, conformability, stretch, all these things that they normally don't have. And the automotive industry, especially the automotive interior, is covered with textiles that also often need some electronic functionality embedded. Sometimes that's done by just separating them. So even when you think of the armrest on your door panel, sometimes it will be leather wrapped and then an HMI switch and button plastic housing system is just set into the frame. But as design and products improve, they don't want to necessarily have to make those separations. Sometimes you want to be able to merge them together. And the auto industry has mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and soft goods people all working together on this auto interior. So it's like the people are there, the problems are there, the money is there because cars are expensive. I think that's one of the things about, often people hear textile and e-textile and they're like, you're making t-shirts. And it's like, t-shirts are $20. It's really hard to put electronics in that in a way that's going to be so valuable that somebody doesn't care if it's, 10 times the price. But for cars, they're already very expensive. They do have small margins. They are very cost sensitive, but they already have a budget line for a heater. They already have a budget line for switch panel. So it's like, if we can get ours in instead of the other person's component, that's an opportunity that's so much more standardized than trying to be like, make your shirts do something they don't. Like, yeah. Hire a bunch of people to your team and do some new stuff that you've never done before. So that's why we love auto. It's like the structure is interesting. They want these sort of technologies for electromechanical reasons. Sometimes they want them for manufacturing efficiency or cost-saving reasons. They're reasons that people can put some money behind. Yeah, so that's one of our favorites.
Wow, that seems like a match made in heaven. During my research, I found out that one of the things that you really struggled with when you were doing your blazer collection was trying to get appointments with buyers at fashion houses. Naturally, that's tough. I'm guessing it's equally or far more difficult to kind of get your foot into the automotive industry and get speaking to people there, or not? I don't know. How did you get your foot in there?
It is difficult. But I feel like it's difficult in a different way because fashion buyers, everyone who has anybody who's ever made a scarf who thinks that it can be in a store is reaching out to them. So they really have a lot of inbound. And the thing that differentiates the inbounders from each other is very subjective. You're like, I like that scarf, I don't like that one. And that's the choice. I think that for the automotive industry, it can be hard to get your foot in the door, but they don't have as many people. Like it's kind of an opaque world. So the people who are reaching out are kind of already interested in doing an automotive component. They have some sort of technological solution. It's already kind of narrowed down. And often the decision-making is much more objective, not completely, of course, but it's, they're like, can you pass this test? Can you pass this test? Can you meet this price? If so, maybe we can talk. If you can't, come back to us when you can. And so I think that we just kept taking that information and being like, now we can pass this test. Now we can meet this price. And that really helped us to warm up these relationships versus if you're talking to a fashion buyer, it's a lot harder to be like, do you like this season's scarf? Do you like this season's scarf? You know, it's hard to really, like, if you're persistent, it's harder to have that persistence pay off. But in terms of getting our foot in the door, there is a program called Plug and Play. So we just announced this partnership that we're working on with Yanfeng, who's an automotive tier 1 supplier. We met them through Plug and Play, which is this startup accelerator program. So the program, I really love it, actually. I think they're doing just the right thing because they do invest, but their main focus is on making partnerships between corporates who want to innovate and startups. And if they see that corporates are buying your thing, then they might want to invest in you, which is really smart on their end. So they made that initial connection, and it was a warm connection because they're part of Plug and Play because they want to meet startups. So Plug and Play really helped us get going. And then from there, I feel like the more we learn, the easier it is to get in the door because when you tell someone, I can pass these tests, we have auto industry, we know this, they're much more open to talking to you.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine once you've found this product market fit, your strategy has also sort of shifted a little bit because now you're thinking about the supply chain, scaling, price points. How has that been over the last, say, 3-4 years now that you're really honed in on who your customer is, what they need, what targets you need to meet? How has that changed the company?
I mean, it's really been what feels like a more difficult process than maybe it needs to be. I don't know, maybe other people are better at this, but we spent a really long time trying to get the full system together. So now we are looking a lot more at production, commercialization, getting everything sort of ready for scale. But I would say even up until about 6 months ago, we were like, okay, we know who the customer is. What's the best way to reach them? And that was a really hard question. Strangely enough, you know, you can think engineers at automotive tier 1s, they're not really using Instagram. They're not on TikTok. They like LinkedIn. We use LinkedIn a lot. Sometimes they're open to direct outbound emails, but also often their companies have really strong spam blockers. So it's hard to do really good outbound. They do trade shows, but trade shows are really expensive. So we're like, is that really the best use of our budget to spend, you know, $10,000 going and showing up somewhere? What does the data look like? So yeah, all of that goes to say that we were talking about this the other day, actually. It's like every time we solve a problem, there's kind of a new problem to solve. It's like, okay, cool, we think that there's an opportunity here. How do we reach those people? That's a whole nother question. What's the optimal way? Once we've answered that question, then, you know, you get more refined questions about what sort of content is best for LinkedIn for this customer. So it feels like a never-ending sort of process to get all the way to the finish line.
Thinking about scaling up, how have you worked out your supply chain, making 1 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000? I think the design and many factors of your solution would also have to be tweaked and refined. How did you work through that, and how did you find the right partners for this production?
Yeah, of course. So there's a supply chain. We've done a lot of sourcing over time, and we've also done iterative sourcing. So I think that we've replaced all the components from when we started with cheaper, better performing, maybe more reputable vendor components for our product. But I think one of the most important parts for us for scalability is that we met our manufacturing partner in 2017, and we've been working with them ever since. So every time we need to solve a problem, every time we need to do something for the product, or, you know, we were trialing this new connection method earlier this year. And so once we think it might work, we take it to our manufacturer and we're like, can you do this? Can you do trials? Is it viable for you? So with that, we didn't run into the bottleneck of 1 to 10,000 because we've been working with our manufacturing partner all along the way to make sure that the work that we do is at least somewhat scalable.
I mean, I can imagine this is a great space to be in as a startup as you're starting to really grow and scale, and you're selling to customers. That's what you dream about, isn't it? Getting your products out there in the thousands. But do you still get a lot of time to do your experimental research? What you enjoyed doing right at the start was just playing with materials, creating new materials. This question really comes from also one of our listeners, Child. She herself is an e-textile entrepreneur. She's got set up a company, and she's kind of going through a similar transition. She was making making lots of interesting experiments and developed a couple of products. Now there's a lot of interest, which is great, but she's kind of torn between being the researcher and being this person who's getting into supply and production and meeting client needs and also tweaking her solution to what the customers want, which you talked about. How do you kind of keep both hats on?
I think I also know her.
You would, yeah. She's one of the e-textile community.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there are kind of two pathways. I think that if one is to raise a lot of money, you can hire experts to wear all of these hats, and you can operate in the zone where you like the hat the best. But I think if you don't take that approach, the unfortunate thing is that you must learn to wear every single hat. Like my process has very much been so, and we're a very small team, so, maybe it's different for someone else, but I feel like I cannot hire someone until I know how to do that role. And so first I have to step away, the operating, like the finances and operations of the company will always be a central task for me. But then I add on, okay, this year I guess I'm learning how to market. I need to learn about SEO. I need to learn conversion rates. I need to learn different social media platforms and what they're good for. And once I have that really ingrained, then I can hire someone to be like, this is what you need to do. And I know how to monitor if you're actually doing it well. And I think only once you've worn all of those hats and then hired someone into all of those positions can one then come back to the thing that they want to do most. And so I do think that we have a few of these positions to still fill out, but I am starting to sort of see that glimmer where I'm getting back a little bit into research. We're thinking about some new products. I'm doing the genesis phase on those products, the like quick and dirty, reading papers, getting to the I'm doing the is this possible phase, which I really enjoy. And I think that's only because I can pop over to marketing and be like, how are those analytics looking? Is it what I expect? Okay, great. Back to the research. I don't think that there's really a world where you can never have that phase of learning all the hats and hiring for all the hats and only focus on what you want unless you raise a bunch of money to just hire experts to do all of the stuff that, is distracting you.
How do you navigate when times are really difficult, when you can't quite see the light at the end of the tunnel? What is your North Star? How do you keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there have definitely been a few times where things just feel really bleak. And I am a pretty persistent person, so I think I will generally push through. But I feel like there are times when people have come through for me where I may not have, Esky is a big part of that. Her partnership in working on Loomia has helped in times where I'm like, I don't know what we should do. I'm like, you see this data, I see this data.
Right.
What are we going to do? And, maybe my intuition would be like, this is just not really feasible. Let's call it a day. But in that moment, Esky is like, I'm down to take the risk. And she's not someone who's like irresponsible. So I think in those moments you're like, well, if you're down, I guess I'm down. What can I say? And I feel like in times my spouse also, like if Esky and I are both freaking out, then my spouse might be like, you can do it. It's always fine in the end. Even when you're the one who's like, maybe not this time, but when someone else is like, I feel like it will be fine. You're like, I guess that's true. I guess I'll keep trying. So no, there are definitely some people who have made, I can like see moments in life where I'm like, without this person, I would have made a different decision. We also had this investor come in when we were in like a really sticky spot. And I feel like I can just count those. I'm like, without Esky, without my spouse, without this investor, we would have made different decisions. I would have made different decisions. Yeah.
And it sounds like you have had all the sort of right support, like you said. They just came through when you needed it. And one of the big support that you got recently is a $275,000 grant from the American Seed Fund, which is very exciting. So congratulations on that. How are you sort of hoping to use that fund, and what is the big milestone that you're aiming for?
Of course, yeah. We are working on Surprise, an automotive component.
Okay.
And who knew? And we're really excited because these components require a lot of testing. And there are some small things even, like the component we're working on is quite large. And in our current in-house setup is a little bit too small. So we can get some new tools to work on this larger component. We are outsourcing testing so we can get third-party lab results. Like we are getting this component really ready for the auto market with all the validation behind it. And we hope that this will help us make an extra step forward in getting things on cars, not just, working together, hoping that it will be ready for production soon, but that we can come to a customer and be like, we validated this part. Here's all the testing. Here's all the details. Here's all the costing. You buy it or you don't. But we hope that this will help us get closer to that stage.
And what is that timeline between you selling a product to a car company and it being on the road? Do you know how long that takes, the manufacturing?
Working on a project now with SOP 2026 that we've been working on since, I think, the very end of 2022, maybe. So, that's a long time. That's 4 years. Wow.
I mean, that's a strong partnership, though. I mean, in that time, the relationship that you have to build.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing what goes into putting things in cars. Like, it's just super interesting. I think our team, we just came back from a Detroit visit where, a lot of these customers are located. And it's like the effort and time and detail that goes into wrapping one of the surfaces in your car is its own entire project. Like, I think that's the part of me that loved fashion, was this like construction part and the material selection part and all these like nitty gritty little, like when you're in fashion, you might care a lot about like different kinds of pleats. And like, I loved all the different kinds of pleats because they take different construction techniques to form. And so I feel like that part of things has come very full circle because we're like really deep in wrapping right now. And it's so interesting.
Let's go a bit back now to when you were growing up. Tell us a bit about where you were born, where you grew up, what life was like as a young girl.
Yeah, of course. I'm from San Diego. I grew up in San Diego. I spent a lot of time with my parents when I was growing up, and I appreciate that time. We traveled a lot because my mom is a flight attendant. So we had lots of really interesting adventures. I remember lots of like vignettes of my family in the airport. At that point, you fly standby if you have someone who's in the airlines. And so that means that you may or may not get on the plane. So there are just many times where we would be like, guess we're not flying today. If they don't call you, you don't get on. And yeah, I mean, I feel like, I think my parents really like enriched my childhood with lots of activities and projects and places, and I feel very grateful that they could do that.
That's lovely. So what were some of these hobbies or interests that you had at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I had lots of interests, of course. I think that they were all like crafting, like I wanted to make stuff. At one point, I asked my mom if she could get me a paper slicer so that you can like slice straight lines. If you want to make like cool origami or cards or things, like you need straight lines. And I was like, I need this slicer. And she was like, you can't have one because you'll slice your fingers off. And it was, a whole thing until I finally got this slicer. I think I saw things online and I was like, oh, wow, I want to make that too. And then I would like ask my parents and, eventually I might be able to make the thing. Yeah, it was a lot of just like making stuff. I think that was a big part. I did sports as well, but I remember spending a lot of time with like, little crafty stuff.
So do you remember what got you interested in making clothes specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I took a sewing class in elementary school, and we had a sewing machine at home already because of my dad. And he was like, I'll show you some other cool stuff. He's like, you want the special tips? I'll show you some cool stuff on the sewing machine. And I think that really got me into it because, I think when your parent like works on something with you, it really like fulfills you in multiple ways. And so that was very exciting for me. I think my dad told me that maybe I should also consider architecture because he saw that I like to do these little like maker projects and things. And the hard thing about architecture is that you can't get started. You can't just like make a building by yourself. I guess that you can design it, but that was also it. I was like, oh, architecture is like too hard. I'm gonna have to like wait too long for that. So I was like, oh, I'll go out. You can start sewing something today. So that's sort of what also was appealing to me about fashion.
Do you still make clothes for yourself?
No, I don't anymore. I would kind of like to. It'd be fun, but yeah, I don't these days. Maybe I'll get back to it. Like I would like to.
I can see your love for fabrics and materials and textiles. Is there any piece of clothing or textiles or fabric that holds very special meaning for you or memories for you that sort of you hold on to?
Yeah, I really like that question. I mean, yeah, I guess that there are a few things. There are so many things that are attached to memories. And yeah, I feel like I have this one sweater from my father that I really love. Like it reminds me of him. And that's one thing.
Could you describe that sweater?
Yeah, of course. It has this kind of like, I feel like now I'm not going to, after all my discussion about textiles, I'm not going to describe it so well, but it's like a cream colored wool knit sweater. It has like these speckled black pieces like twisted into the yarn, and it has like a curl in the knit. So the actual surface isn't just knit surface. It has kind of like a curl. Yeah, and a turtleneck. I don't know. Has a nice memory to it.
That's lovely. You quoted Seth Godin once, and he said, if it scares you, it might be a good thing to try. And I feel like you've really lived by that quote. So, and you've also done many, many scary things to build up a company like Loomia and to build up not just a company, but a really successful company, I should say. What is something that you're doing today that is scary?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I need to come up with something. Well, I don't know. I had a call with someone earlier today that I really wasn't looking forward to. And by the end of the call, which I think happens in most cases, I was really glad that I did it. I definitely had a moment before the call where I was like, maybe I don't actually have this. It wasn't anything bad. It was just, I'm working on like a little side project, and there's a producer, and the producer like split into two companies, and I was working with one, but we weren't making progress. So now I like called up the other one, and I was like, I know this is awkward, but maybe you can help me out. And I was like, I don't even know if I want to be doing this, but yeah. Then by the end, I was really happy. So yeah, maybe that's the one thing. I took the call, organized, did the call.
And it worked out. That's great. It's definitely a great quote to live by. Where do you see Loomia in the next 10 years? What's your vision for the company?
Yeah, I mean, especially this year, I have lots of, I really enjoyed sort of dreaming and thinking about what would be in the next 10 years. So I think one of our strategies is, of course, to refine and improve the Loomia Electronic Layer, make more applications for different industries, have better testing results, cost engineer, just make it a better product in every way we can. But also, we are working on some new products outside of the e-textile industry. I think I've mentioned this to you as well. So that's been really fun. And I think that some of these products could actually sell into the fashion industry in the end, which would be really fun for me to kind of get back into that industry in a roundabout way. So yeah, working on some new products, and I hope in 10 years that Loomia will be a resource of next generation materials for designers and engineers. Like I would love if engineers and designers of different companies feel like Loomia materials have made their jobs easier or better or made exciting new products possible. That would be, that's the goal.
Oh, I love that. What are some of the things that you're really proud of from what you've achieved in the last 10 years?
I like that question. It's always fun to think about things that, are going well rather than things that are going wrong. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing, honestly, is our profitability, especially this year, because that gives us freedom to make our own decisions in a lot of ways. And then I think secondarily is just kind of sticking around. Because you keep putting one foot in front of the other, and I think that sometimes it's not always that easy, but I'm proud that we've kept going because you get to more and exciting places. I'm glad that I can see the things that I see today, and it's only because we kept going over a long period of time.
From your experience, what would you say the future of the e-textile industry looks like in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see the big opportunities?
Yeah, so I'm really hoping that e-textiles start to blend more into the flexible electronics world. I think right now, mentally, they're still, people think of them as quite different, where an engineer may be like, I need a flex PCB. And if a flex PCB or maybe even like a printed ink on TPU can't do the job for them, they're like, not possible. But sometimes an e-textile can do it for you. And so I hope that will start to get put into that engineering toolbox where someone will see these materials as just another electronics technology for solving their engineering challenges. And I think that that's where this space succeeds over time. And so we at least are doing all that we can to kind of position ourselves in that way as an engineering tool for your toolbox. You know, sometimes printed ink on TPU is great. Flex PCB is always going to be cheap and reliable. If those two can't do it, maybe try something like ours, or try liquid metal, or try these other options, but kind of getting it out of this like really maker hackery, like light up dress space and getting it more into the engineering toolbox space.
I was so excited to read about this when you were recognized as one of the inventors in the exhibition Picturing Women Inventors that was curated by the Smithsonian Institute and the Lemelson Center for Study of Innovation and Invention. How did that recognition make you feel? You know, it's such an amazing way to sort of mark what you've achieved and what you've done in the industry. I think really quite a key moment. How did that make you feel?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I was very honored to be placed alongside people who I really admire and respect and who I feel like are far out of my league. I also really enjoyed the trip to DC. That was fun. But yeah, I mean, I was listening to another podcast recently, and the woman on the podcast was saying that, you know, the highs could be high and the lows could be low. And, you know, she uses this two will pass in both cases, where it's like something great happens, but that doesn't, you know, don't take your eye off the prize. Something bad happens, don't take your eye off the prize. Like, you know, the waves come and go, all of it passes. So I was honored, but also I feel like I think that like those honors are wonderful and I really appreciate them. But also I feel so much more like I've accomplished something when a customer is like, this is what I've been looking for. Or when a customer is like, great, you met our price point. Or, you know, when we send them a sample and they're like, oh, cool, it works. You know, that's when I'm like, okay, on the right track. I think these sort of accolades, of course, I wouldn't prefer not to have it, but it doesn't even mean you're on the right track in terms of a business. Like somebody found you, they put you on this list, and, you know, that's all it means. So I try and kind of focus on some of the other customer business metrics.
We have quite a lot of young listeners, students, recent graduates, especially in textiles. What advice would you give someone who's interested in pursuing e-textiles, and where do they start, and what are the opportunities in this space?
Yeah, so I mean, also something I'd love to see, maybe you've noticed this too, is that some of the big tech companies are building departments for e-textiles. Meta is one who has like a soft goods lab. I think Apple also has a soft goods lab. So I would definitely try and find some of these departments that are hiring and get your foot in the door by learning from others and seeing what they're doing. And that can sort of help you specialize and figure out exactly where you want to go. I would think, you know, at the time when I started Loomia, I had a grant, and that was very helpful for funding my life. But I think if I didn't have this grant, in my personal opinion, it's better to take the pathway of having a job, building up something on the side until it's profitable enough or well-defined enough where you could very confidently do it full-time. So I would say if you want to do your own thing, I would get a great job, build my own thing up on the side. If you don't want to do your own thing, I would find some of these soft goods labs who are innovating, get in there and work really hard and like find a good space. And constantly learn things, like, you know, the more information you can cross-pollinate in your mind, the more original ideas you can come up with. So, you know, don't be afraid to sort of investigate new things and learn new things.
What's an important mindset that an inventor like yourself, an innovator, an entrepreneur should have in being successful?
Yeah, I mean, I also feel like different people find different ways to success. You know, so many different mindsets work. But I do think that something that's helped me is just kind of thinking of it's a question of when more than if. I find that it's a challenging, like, it's hard for me if I start thinking about if, like, will we be able to solve it? Will we be able to do it? It's kind of like, what? It's when. If I can just stick around, I can just keep going for 10 years, I'll solve it, that sort of thing. And I think most things actually are that way. It's like if you're not trying to be a famous athlete or like a pop star, or like something where you will age out of it. If you're trying to solve some non-rocket science kind of problem, I mean, you can probably do it if you just can spend a lot of time on it. And I think the way that you can spend a lot of time on something is by being consistent and kind of moderate or modest. So it's like set yourself up to just spend a lot of time on this problem. And if you can do that, you'll probably be able to solve it. And so that's really the mindset I've taken with Loomia is I'm like, how do we set ourselves up to just spend a lot of time on these problems until, but basically for me, I'm like, we stop working on these problems when the money's gone is the thing, so like, how do I make sure that doesn't happen? So you can just work on them forever. And with that, something good is bound to come out.
Absolutely. I mean, your company, what you've built is a real proof that consistency, showing up every day, doing what you love, experimenting, doing things that you're scared of. And you've done that over 10 years. And now you're really starting to sort of sell products and enjoy that phase, which probably seemed like a long way away even 5 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. I appreciate all the kind words and encouragement. We are really small, so sometimes I look at other companies. I think that you spoke with Beth from Unspun. I mean, she has such a big company. I'm like, oh my God, we're so slow, we're so tiny. But it's step by step we get there. So I appreciate that.
On my last episode, we had Nina Morenzi and Amanda Johnston, who are the brains behind Future Fabrics Expo. So this is really focusing on next-gen materials and sustainable solutions for the fashion and home textile industry. And they do an expo every year in London and New York as well, which is incredible. They've left a question for you. They did not know you were the next guest, but they left a question for the next guest. So this one's to you from them. What books have changed your life?
Yes, I like that question a lot. I loved this book that I read in high school called The Moviegoer by Walker Percy. It's like an American novel it's like one of those high school readings that they just decide that you should do. But the whole thesis was about this protagonist who was on the search. And I feel like that idea really resonated with me because his entire life was kind of constructed around like looking for something or answering questions. And I think that is very much so what it means. I think you get to enjoy another level of living if every day you're kind of like, but how do we make the material more flexible? How do we make it more durable? It's like if you sort of have this like rich inner life because you're kind of have this very long-term search that you're on, I think it can be very enriching. And I love that from this book. I felt like it really spoke to that idea. I'm trying to think of something that's a little bit more recent that I really enjoyed. Yeah, I would say maybe that's it. There are other books that I've loved. Actually, there is this book by a Turkish writer called, in Turkish it's Bir Tuhaflık Kafadam. In English, it's like A Strangeness in My Mind. I don't know if it was life-changing, but I finished it recently. And it was just almost like a movie of one person's life from leaving their village to moving to Istanbul, to getting married, to having children, like just their entire, and it's a very humble life. Like he's a yogurt seller and a boza, it's like the special drink, a boza seller. But I also loved that story because, I don't know, it was just like a full, complete, interesting, heartfelt life that had nothing to do with accomplishing world-changing feats, or, doing something wild and crazy. It was very, like, humbling and heartfelt in that way. And I think that I also really enjoyed reading that at that moment.
I'd love for you to leave a question for the next guest, whoever that might be.
Yeah, of course. I would ask the next guest, what is something interesting that you learned recently?
Okay. What are you enjoying the most today? What is piquing your curiosity and giving you energy? Anything you can share about? Any side project?
So we're working on some of these new materials, and I'm trying to make this yarn. Like, this is my new little project hobby. I think that I have a much clearer idea of what this yarn's properties should be. So that's been really fun. But I think also separately from like work items, there's a forest near where I live. And if I go to the forest, I always feel much more like curious and energetic. So I went there this morning and now I'm like, we have work to do. Let's do it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Maddy. It's been such a joy. I've known you and I've seen your work, but it's so amazing to really just get to know you and understand you and where, sort of see what drives you, what gives you energy, what kept you going, how you navigated through those challenging times. It's amazing. And you're such an inspiration to so many people. I know that for a fact, and especially people who've been trying to put one foot in front of the other in the space of e-textiles. I think you've really given people hope that we just need to keep going and there are opportunities out there. It's about how we sort of find them, discover the right. So yeah, thank you so much for inspiring all of us. We love the work that you do and so curious and excited about what's coming up next year and the year after from Loomia. So we'll keep an eye out for all of it.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. I think this was a really pleasant podcast interview, probably one of the best I've had. So thank you, Mili, for being such a thoughtful interviewer. Really nice to speak with you.
Maddy's journey is truly inspiring, and I hope this glimpse into her story has sparked insights to guide your own entrepreneurial path. If you're interested to learn more about Loomia or get your hands on their soft electronic components for heating, pressure sensing, and others, please be sure to check out the link in the show notes below to connect with them. And if you'd like to learn more about smart textiles and e-textiles in general for your products or are working on a project in this place, let's connect. You can book a free 20-minute appointment with me through my website, noordinarycloth.com. So let's have a chat. Listen, there's no strings attached, just a conversation. Spotify listeners, feel free to leave a message in the comments of this episode to set up a free call, and I'll be sure to get back to you. I'd love to help you, and if I don't have the answers, I probably know someone who does, and I'm happy to connect you all. Please share this episode with anyone who might find it inspiring and valuable. Your support to spread the word about this podcast is deeply appreciated. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider buying me a coffee using the link in the show notes. It helps fuel those late night editing sessions as I bring these stories to you. In case you want to hear more about smart and e-textiles, I've recommended a couple of past episodes on e-textiles in the show notes below. Thank you again for joining me today. Don't forget to subscribe for more conversations at the intersection of textiles, technology, craft, and sustainability. This is your host, Mili Tharakan. Until next time.